Hey everyone, S-Dub Nation here, and welcome back to a brand new Marvel video here on the channel. I like to stop and take the time to rank all of the MCU movies, all 23 ranked from the worst to the best. Please note that everything that I will say in this video is just my very own opinion. My list is certainly not the right list, it is just my list, and you are free to comment down below your ranking of all 23 MCU films ranked from the worst to the best, just like me, or you could just do your favorite. This is something that I've always wanted to do, just could not find the time to. Now, I found the time to, and I'm ready to rank all 23 movies inside of the MCU. Like, comment, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into my ranking. Kicking off my list at number 23, I have Thor the Dark World. Now, there's nothing embarrassing about this movie. It's pretty enjoyable, and I really did like it when I watched it for my MCU rewatch. But I do think that there are a lot of different plot lines in here that are just boring. The Malekith stuff, the Dark Elves stuff, all of that is just boring. The Jane and Thor relationship just does not work that well. But I love the stuff on Asgard. I love the stuff with Loki. And also, some of the action in it is pretty cool. It's not the best MCU movie, but it's certainly not dumpster garbage. It's just pretty bland. Coming in at number 22 for me has got to go to Iron Man 2. This is a very enjoyable movie, as it being the first MCU movie I've ever watched. Yes, I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I love Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. This movie made me fall in love with Iron Man. Don Cheadle is a nice addition to the movie, but overall it just feels like there are too many plot lines trying to battle to be the main plot line, as they were more focused on making an Avengers setup movie while also trying to tell an individual story, and it just does not work. At 21, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, it's very enjoyable, just like Iron Man 2. You can watch it, but some of the humor inside of it is pretty gross. I do think that I laughed the hardest at this movie because the jokes do land. They are pretty funny, but some of them are kind of like gross, kind of crass humor that I've never seen like Marvel actually do. But I love the stuff that they did with Yondu and Rocket. That was the main stuff that I really loved. But everything else regarding Star-Lord and Eagle, it just comes off as boring and kind of bland to me. Kicking off my top 20 list has got to go to The Incredible Hulk. I really love this movie. It's a Hulk movie. Come on, how could you not like this? It's not as bad as people say it is. Yes, it is a little bit odd because this is the second movie inside of the MCU, but I do think that The Incredible Hulk is a perfectly fine Hulk movie. It's not as bad as a lot of people say it is, but it certainly has boring parts at times. And also, come on, it's just pretty cool seeing Hulk pick up a car and use it as boxing gloves against Abomination. And also, going back to Abomination, I can't wait to see what they do with him inside of She-Hulk. Coming in at number 19 for me has got to go to Captain Marvel, another film that gets a lot of hate that it doesn't really deserve. Every time that I watch this movie, I like it a little bit more. It's fun seeing a new time period. I love seeing a younger Nick Fury. Samuel L. Jackson is great in the role as always, and we also get to see Skrulls inside of the mix, which will play into Secret Invasion, which I am very excited for. There are a couple of plot lines in here that are pretty bland and not at all interesting, and also the main character just comes off as distant because she doesn't even know more about herself, so we have to learn about her as she's learning about herself, so we don't really get to relate to this character as much. And it just felt like Marvel was trying to make a female-led superhero movie rather than a Captain Marvel movie. But like I say in all my rankings, at least Brie Larson's hot in the role. Coming in at number 18 for me has got to go to Thor. I love this movie, mainly because of the score. It has a fantastic theme inside of it because it makes you feel like you're flying on Asgard. Speaking of Asgard, the shots on Asgard are just beautiful. It has this Shakespearean grandeur to it, so golden. I love the themes and the relationship between Loki and Thor. Even though Loki does feel a little bit small inside of this movie, I do really enjoy most of the stuff in Asgard, and also some of the stuff on New Mexico. I love the fish out of water humor. But speaking of New Mexico, some of the stuff is kind of bland and kind of boring. But once you get past that, this is a perfectly fine Thor movie. Coming in at number 17 for me has got to go to Iron Man 3. Robert Downey Jr. has chemistry with almost everyone inside of this film. Shane Black knows how to direct great action with that plane sequence. And also, I just love the fact that we have a great Tony Stark PTSD arc inside of this film. I really do love it. But other than that, the plot lines inside of this movie just feel like they get thrown out the window going into the bigger stuff of the MCU. I like seeing the extremes. I like seeing Tony Stark blow up his Iron Man suits for Pepper, but going into the rest of the MCU, they just get thrown out the window, especially that plot line with the vice president trying to kill the president. Also, I do wish that we would have got the Mandarin that they teased, but I guess that this was the best approach to appeal to a more broader audience. I guess we gotta wait till Shang-Chi. Coming in at number 16 for me has gotta go to Captain America: The First Avenger. I loved the first hour of this movie. Just a perfect origin story for Steve Rogers, showing this character that he was always good at heart before he became Captain America, before he became big Chris Evans. He was always good at heart. He was always the one standing up to the bullies or willing to put his life on the line for his teammates. Going into the Red Skull stuff and the second act, they just montage through the most important stuff, World War II, the stuff that makes Captain America who he is. They montage through it because they just wanted to have a way to have Captain America inside of the Avengers next year instead of actually telling a great Captain America war movie. Kicking off my top 15 list has got to go to AntMan and the Wasp. I really do like this movie, but it does kind of feel a little bit bland and sometimes boring. The jokes really don't land that well for me because it feels like I've seen them before. And honestly, you really don't see Ant-Man do much inside of this movie. You mainly see Wasp take the spotlight, which I do like. But I mean, the movie is called Ant-Man and the Wasp, not just Wasp and Scott Lang in a robe. I do love the MacGuffin storyline, just something that every little party is trying to get to. And also, it does feel like this is the most lighthearted film inside of the MCU, and one that we actually needed after Infinity War. But was it a movie that we actually wanted? Coming in at number 14 for me has got to go to Ant-Man. I really do love this movie, a perfect Ant-Man movie for me. Coming after Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp does kind of feel a little bit anticlimactic. But with this movie, it's the perfect Ant-Man movie. It's a heist movie. We see Scott Lang training with the ants. We see him wanting to take care of his daughter after being an ex-con. So you get a lot more personal aspects inside of it with a lot more family elements, which makes you relate to the character a lot more. I love the Michael Pena stuff. Overall, this movie is just pretty well made, pretty enjoyable. But I do think that the movie would have been a lot better if Edgar Wright would have directed it. Coming in at number 13 for me has got to go to Spider-Man Far From Home. This movie is pretty funny. It is hilarious. It's in strong competition with my funniest MCU film. But I do think that the Edith stuff just kind of did not work. But I'm like, okay, this is still Spider-Man, right? Like, this is still Spider-Man. I always say this. Is this still Spider-Man? Or is this just Peter Parker and his friends on a road trip? And that's what it kind of feels like. We never get Spider-Man inside of New York City swinging around town doing classic Spider-Man stuff. It just feels like, yeah, Peter Parker and his friends on a road trip going through Europe. Also, I love what they did with Mysterio. That action sequence with Mysterio inside of the S.H.I.E.L.D. base. Top 10 best action sequences inside of the entire MCU. Coming in at number 12 for me has got to go to Doctor Strange. I love the fact that the MCU has this visual style of storytelling down pat, but you can definitely feel the MCU template inside of this film. We see a sorcerer do a lot of sorcery things inside of the mix. This is a Doctor Strange movie, so we have all of these twisty, turny elements with the CGI, and apparently the budget was way smaller than Black Panther. Take with that what you will, but I just gotta say, Doctor Strange wowed me because I used to have this movie lore on my list, but I definitely enjoy this movie so much more now, and I am very much excited for the sequel. This doesn't get up there because of the MCU template, and also some of the jokes are pretty bland, and also some of the jokes do feel forced. Coming in at number 11 for me has got to go to Avengers Age of Ultron. I love this movie. I've always said that this movie is going to make my top 10 MCU movies. But I gotta be honest with myself, it's at number 11 for me. I just think my top 10 is much better structurally, but I do think that this movie is actually pretty good. It gets a lot of hate that it really doesn't deserve. Avengers Age of Ultron is a very good movie. I do think that sometimes it does go bigger and better than the original, and when it does go bigger and better than the original, it's actually pretty fantastic. The action inside of it is very cool. I love Ultron as a villain. I love seeing the team act more of like friends and family than just, acquaintances. But the low lows are the fact that it has too many plot lines and it tries to set up too many things. But it only sets up like 3 things: Infinity War, Civil War, and Ragnarok. And if that's a fault of the film, I really don't know what is. Real quick, before I get into my top 10, I'd like to take the time to say that if you are a fan of Marvel, which you probably are, that's why you're watching this video. Click that playlist up above for everything Marvel related that I have on my channel. Also, if you are a fan of the DCEU, I am doing a DCEU rewatch on my podcast. I am going to be doing a 31 on 31 come December 31st, where I'm going to be ranking all DCEU and MCU movies ranked together, excluding Wonder Woman 84. So like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into my top 10. Kicking off my top 10 list has got to go to Black Panther. Now, some might say that this is very disrespectful to have Black Panther at number 10 with recent events of Mr. Boseman's passing. But I do think that, yes, it has gone down for me, mainly because of the CGI. The CGI is really not that good, and that does kind of matter when you're trying to make a big blockbuster like this one. But what this film stood for culturally for the African American community and the impact that it had on us, it worked for me on so many levels around that time, and I still stand by that to this day. It is a little bit overhyped. I really don't think that it deserved Best Picture, but I think that this is a phenomenal film, and it is very great at world building. I love Killmonger as a villain. It has great mature themes inside of the mix, and I love the way that the villain influences a change in perspective for T'Challa. Coming in at number 9 for me has got to go to Captain America Civil War. A lot of people might have this movie up higher, but I do think that, yes, it's a phenomenal film. This movie has the most personal themes inside of the entire MCU because we have Iron Man and Captain America, two sides of the same coin. Both have different perspectives on the matter, but you can also agree with Iron Man's side, but you can also kind of agree with Captain America's side. And also, you bringing in great characters like Black Panther, Spider-Man, making this film just one of the biggest crossovers inside of the entire MCU. And it does kind of make you cry a little bit at the end when you see Captain America and Iron Man fight. Coming in at number 8 for me has got to go to Thor Ragnarok. This is the funniest MCU movie in my opinion, mainly because it just has that great Taika Waititi humor inside of the mix. It's very colorful, it's very vibrant, great CGI. Just overall, this movie worked for me on so many levels, selling me as the best Thor movie because essentially this is what Thor should be, not a goofy character. I mean, yes, Thor is very goofy inside of this movie, but he still has that level of serious tone. But I do think that the way that Taika Waititi directed this movie, it has a lot of funny humor, funniest MCU movie in my opinion, and it just felt like he did not know how to dial down the humor just to let us breathe and take in that dramatic moment. Coming in at number 7 for me has got to go to Spiderman Homecoming. This is a great Spider-Man movie, mainly because we finally get to see the perspective of the MCU, actually just Spider-Man in general, from the eyes of a high schooler. I love the fact that we get to see the little man's perspective on the broader MCU. They do play FMK with the different Avengers like Thor or Hulk or Spider-Man or something like that. This is also one of the most rewatchable MCU films, but I just think what this movie does for Spider-Man as a whole, actual high schooler having actual high school problems like going to parties or getting the girl, going to homecoming. This is what I want to see inside of a Spider-Man movie, though we don't really get to see more of that classic Spider-Man stuff. As this being the first MCU Spider-Man, I can see why they wanted to take a different route. Coming in at number 6 for me has got to go to Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn crafted one of the most heartfelt films inside of the entire MCU because these are characters that were basically unknown. We didn't know about these characters, and then by the end of the film, we cried when a talking tree said, "We are Groot." How was this movie able to make you feel something for a CGI raccoon crying in front of a talking tree saying, "We are Groot"? I also love the humor inside of it. It lands perfectly well for me. I did laugh the hardest in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but I think I laughed more at the first Guardian. And overall, what this film does for making me love the Guardians, it has to come in at number 6. Kick it off my top 5 list has got to go to Avengers Endgame. This movie is the one movie that actually deserves to be called epic on this list because this is the big culmination of all 11 years of the entire MCU. I love the different callbacks. I love the best final battle. I love just everything about this movie, and it really did not disappoint, as it being a great conclusion, an amazing conclusion to this entire Infinity Saga, and also closing out Iron Man's and Captain America's trilogy respectively. As a whole, I loved what this film did, but at the same time, I do have a lot of problems with Professor Hulk. I'm not a big fan of Professor Hulk, and also Fat Thor. Yeah, I get the intention behind it, but other than watching the entire film, I would rather just watch the fan servicey moments than watching the entire thing over, because I just see this film as just those moments and nothing more. Coming in at number 4 for me has got to go to the original Iron Man. Now, originally I was going to have this a lot lower, but I do think that what this film does for the entire MCU, just kicking it off the bat with just this fun, fresh, original comic book movie. Everything that was inside of Endgame was set up right here inside of the first Iron Man. Like I said, having this fresh, original comic book film with a likable lead, likable characters, just overall creating this great comic book film, creating the first MCU film that doesn't have the weight of the entire MCU on its shoulders. It could just worry about being a great film first, then an actual cinematic universe starter. Kicking off my top 3 list has got to go to the Avengers. Just rewatching the Avengers, every time I rewatch the Avengers, I love it so much. It's just a fun comic book movie that really doesn't have that many stakes. Yes, there are a lot of stakes inside of this movie, but it's just an old-fashioned good guys team up together to defeat the one bad guy that has an entire army in this fun, vibrant movie that brings all of these characters together, from the first Iron Man all the way to Captain America, the first Avenger. We had many teases and sneak peeks of the Avengers coming into play, and when we finally get that, it just becomes fun and exciting to see all of these characters just finally be on screen, having the best banter, having the best conversations, just butt heads with each other. Sweet and allegations aside, you gotta admit, he crafted one of the most perfect team-up superhero films ever. My runner-up at number 2 has got to go to Captain America the Winter Soldier. Going back to the Avengers, if that movie was fun, I feel like this one just cut out all the fun stuff and has some of the more stakes inside of the mix. Obviously, going inside of it, we have lots of S.H.I.E.L.D. references. Captain America is working for S.H.I.E.L.D. But once we find out that really S.H.I.E.L.D. is overturned by Hydra, that creates a big risk going forward for the entire MCU, because S.H.I.E.L.D. was the main thing that brought the Avengers together. Once you take that away, that crumples the MCU going forward. And I just love the way that this film made Captain America cool to me. As someone who really was not a big Captain America fan, all I cared about was Iron Man in these movies. But when I saw this movie, I was like, Captain America can actually be really cool. This movie has great action, great cinematography, great characterization, all around just a great film for Captain America, and one of my most rewatched MCU films. But coming in at my number 1 has got to go to Avengers Infinity War. Let's just not talk about the Avengers, let's just talk about Thanos, as Thanos is the big standout here. He's a villain that actually has relatable issues. You can actually see his point of view on things. Like, it all depends on what do you think is morally wrong or right. And that's what I really like about this film, is that you can actually see Thanos' point of view on this situation, but he is still going about it the wrong way. Just seeing all of these characters just come together, the Guardians riffing it off of Tony Stark, Doctor Strange, and Iron Man butting heads, all of this is just such a fun time, such a great movie, just to have a big culmination of all 10 years inside of this film, and one of the most emotional and one of the most impactful endings inside of any MCU film. So it has great action, it has great payoff, and it also has an amazing villain. This is why Avengers Infinity War has to come in at number 1. Alright guys, that was it for the ranking. Please know that everything that I did say in this video was just my very own opinion. My list was certainly not the right list, it was just my list, and you are free to comment down below your ranking of all 23 MCU films ranked from the worst to the best, just like me, or you could just do your favorite. Also, please don't forget to join me on the 31st of December, where I am going to be ranking all 31 films of the MCU and the DCEU ranked together in one big video. So come back on December 31st, where I will be ranking all 31 films inside of that specific genre. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.